Welcome to Anime Breakouts. Story continues. As Alma meets with the authority on Nemesis research named Doc, Doc explains that he sent his assistant to meet with her but realizes now that she must be lost. Alma reminds him that he won't be paid till the job is done, so he heads off to find the Nemesis remains before the Inquisition finds him. Alma hopes that Seth is doing well on his journey, but we see that he is on board an Inquisition ship and questioning why he is being arrested. Seth is prepared to fight them all and they realize that he is using a strange technique. Inquisition Captain Dragunov arrives and is told that the boy ran into their ship. They thought he was suspicious, so they tried to interrogate him, but he started to fight them. Dragunov notices Seth Thorns as such, tries to explain that he just isn't good at flying with the broom, yet Seth forces his way out of the pile and introduces himself as Seth the Sorcerer. Dragunov can't believe how ignorant Seth is and determines that word of their laws hasn't reached the outer lands yet. Seth explains that he hasn't done anything wrong, but they explain that it's only a matter of time and they arrest him. Seth is certain that the cage can't withstand his magic, but he is very wrong. The cage was built specifically for sorcerers, and Dragunov explains that Seth will be imprisoned at the capital for 10 years. Seth states that that won't work for him as he plans to destroy Radiant, but the guards point out how it's just a fairy tale. Dragunov explains that even the word is taboo, and warns him not to add more crimes to his list. Dragunov explains how Seth's curse is what allows him to use magic and sends him deeper into the ship. Seth realizes the trouble he is in and remembers how Alma always used to tell him to hide his horns. He then looks back to when he disappointed Alma with his simplistic plan to find Radiant. He thought he would start by looking somewhere high in the sky, then perhaps deep down below the surface. Alma told him to start in a place called Artemis instead, as it's a research town where sorcerers gather. She urges him to search for a man named Yaga, who is one of the most powerful sorcerers around, but also warns him to stay away from a certain yellow cat. Seth is then startled to see a small creature in his cage and a girl named Melly in the cage next to him. Seth is excited to hear that Molly is from Artemis and was on her way to his island. Island 21 to retrieve an Nemesis. He assumes that the small creature named Boobri is her pet, but it's actually a friend. Melly was separated from the only person that could prove her identity, but she assumes that she will be fine when Doc comes to get her. She is amazed by Seth's horns but disappointed to hear that magic doesn't come out of them. Just then the ship is stopped by Doc, who is sure that he will be in grave danger if the Inquisitors find out that he is carrying Nemesis remains with a ship. Melly's glad to see that Doc has come for her but yells out that she was caged for saying that she was retrieving a Nemesis. Doc tries to deny knowing her, but Dragunov appears to explain that he knows he is carrying a Nemesis and has him thrown in a cage. Seth introduces himself as he explains that he was the one that defeated the Nemesis that he is carrying. Doc 10 states that he gets a big reward if the remains are in good condition, but gets nothing when they are torn to pieces. Doc is too fearful to hunt Nemesis himself and simply allows the sorcerers to do the hard work. He points out how Nemesis fall like rain these days, and it's because the sorcerers are strong enough to defeat the Nemesis that their presence is tolerated. Doc credits them for doing the tough task of defeating Nemesis one by one, but Seth explains that his plan is to take down Radiant instead. He states that he promised Alma he would, and Doc is surprised to hear that Seth is her pupil. Seth wants Doc to take him to Artemis just as Booby shows up with the keys to the cage. The trio make their way up the ship, but Seth explains that he needs to get his stuff first. They have a hard time finding his stuff, so Doc just wants to leave. They finally spot his things but are shocked to find that they have been caught by Dragunov. Doc tries to say that Seth threatened him, but Melee screams for them to just give Seth his things back so he can go find Radiant. Seth then surprises everyone when he uses his Titan punch to attack the guards, and his two new companions retrieve their things. Melly shows off her defensive magic, but it isn't enough as they are once again surrounded. Melly is overwhelmed and begins to faint, so Seth tells her that he will do something. However, Melly shockingly tells him to shut up and instantly wipes everyone out. Daka explains that it's her curse. When Melee is under extreme stress, her personality completely changes. Melly demands that they give them back their ship and is forced to blow them away when they don't listen. Doc can't believe how much trouble they are getting in, and Dragunov somehow sneaks up on Melly. He points out how Sorcerer should have never revealed their true nature and decides that Melly will receive capital punishment. Doc fears for her life, but Seth soon threatens Dragunov to not touch her. His Titan punch does massive damage and it allows him to finally make their escape. Dragunov credits them for escaping and stops his soldier from shooting them down. He explains that they can't do anything too bold if they make it to Artemis. More importantly though, he is intrigued by how Seth was able to use magic with his bare hands on board Doc's ship. Medley apologizes for her personality change and Doc states that it's the reason why she will never be a great sorcerer. Seth is amazed by her power though, and excitedly asks her to teach him some offensive magic. Doc then explains that they are nearing Artemis and Seth prepares for the city of sorcerers. They finally arrive at Artemis, where Seth is amazed by all the other sorcerers' ships. He is told that in order to find work there he will have to register as a resident, but Seth explains that he was only there to find Yaga for some reason. Duck desperately wants that to become a resident and tells them that Yaga will only meet him if he is a resident. Seth agrees to do it and is amazed by the place called Sorcerer's Paradise, as it's a place where sorcerers don't have to suffer for just being themselves. Doc rushes them so they don't miss the ceremony, but then explains that Seth is the only one that needs to go. Seth takes him along anyway as he seems to know Alma, and we see that someone is intrigued to hear that named Seth, and the others arrive at the welcoming ceremony and Seth the shocked, and an announcer introduces the founder of the crazy academy. It's a yellow cat named Master Lord Majesty. The cat explains that new members will be completing missions with them as fellow sorcerers, and together they will eradicate the curse that causes them such suffering. The new members are called onto the stage, where the headmaster gives them a contract to sign. Seth tries to read it, but Master Learned Majesty tells them it offers lots of bonuses and implores him to hurry up and sign. The cat is glad to see him sign as everyone applauds, but the new members then realize that the contract is charging them thousands just for using the pen. The ink costs thousands as well, and Lord Majesty explains that each of them now owes a massive debt to the academy. They will now have to take part in missions as Nemesis hunters for the academy to repay the debt, and the crowd cheers as they were all there. At one point the ceremony is over and Doc is glad to know that he won't have to see Seth anymore. However, an official arrives to explain that Doc has been acknowledged as Seth's guardian and guardians assume equal responsibility for the debt incurred. Afterward Seth realizes now why Alma warned him about a yellow cat, but states it's not like they have to do what the swindling cat says. Seth explains that he will just find Yaga and leave after he finds Radiant, but Doc tries to explain that that would just leave him with all the debt. They head out in search of Yaga anyway and encounter two paths. Seth ignores Doc to choose the golden path, so Doc Moss explained that the golden path costs money. Set the next steps: a towel from a nice old woman to wipe dark sweat, but Doc points out that he was charged for that too. They head to a pub where Doc warns them not to order anything, but Seth instantly orders some milk. Just then Melly is treated poorly just for asking about Yaga, but this causes her personality to change and she destroys the pub. At the end of the day Melly apologizes profusely. Seth can't believe they haven't found Yaga and Doc is stressed about that. Seth is shocked to hear a cauldron speak to them and the small man emerges from it, but states that he is no one worth knowing by name. He explains that he might be willing to tell him where Yaga is, but first asks Seth what he thinks about the academy that Lord Majesty built. Seth says that the cat is a creep, but the town doesn't have anyone calling them infected or treating them differently. Everything unfortunately costs money, but everyone seems really happy. The man wonders if Seth knows why Majesty charges so much money. Emily explains that it's for research into curing the curse. The man begins to explain that it's not all the money is for, but their conversation is interrupted by alarms. Doc says that the Inquisition must have followed them there and are attacking now. The man is glad that Seth is there to see this and tells him to watch carefully. We then see that the Inquisition has come for Seth, but several sorcerers on brooms appear to meet them. Dragunov explains the order he received to retreat and reveals that they aren't the only ones with influence in this country. He is talking about Master Lord Majesty and wonders how much money he threw around to stop them. Furthermore, he states that members of the 13th Sorcerer Coven are in that town, and any one of them could take on 1,000 of their soldiers. The Town of Artemis has military and political might, so fighting them would be equivalent to going to war with the nation itself. Dragunov tells them to retreat but thinks about how intriguing the boy with horns is and decides that he must inform General Torque of him. Seth is amazed at how they were able to push them away, and the man points out how that is the power of Artemis Academy and its majesty who amasses it all. It's the last sanctuary for prosecuted sorcerers, and majesty will do anything necessary to protect it. Seth explains his plan to destroy Radiant, but the man questions if it would make more sense for Seth to just use his strength to protect Artemis, the place that protects sorcerers. Seth rejects the idea since everyone outside still has to face the dangers of the Nemesis, and to help them they have to change the world itself. The man laughs at how Seth thinks he can change the world, but Seth points out that if no one else will, then he will do it. Seth thinks that the man will take him to see Yaga now, but the man reveals that he is Yaga, member of the 13th Sorcerer Coven. Elsewhere, General Torque is surprised to hear that someone actually managed to escape Dragunov. Dragunov apologizes, but Torque just wants to make sure that Dragunov actually saw the boy with horns use magic with his bare hands. Torque wants them to keep a close eye on the city and wants to be told the next time the boy with horns is spotted. Another member arrives and Max to hear about the boy who uses magic barehanded. Torque points out that they are well aware of the danger he possesses and decides that they must capture him at all costs. Sometime later, Seth barges in on Melly's tea party and he asked her to teach him magic, so she wonders why. Said things back to when he spoke with Yaga and told him that he was almost pupil. He asked Yaga where Radiant is, but Yaga just destroys the letter Elmo sent explaining who Seth is. Yaga says that he has nothing to give someone with no strength, and if he wants him to teach him, then set me to show him that he is strong enough to earn it. Yaga was unimpressed by his Titan punch since he is just gathering Fantasia on his fist and tells him to learn basic magic first. Seth desperately asked Melly to teach him, but she can, since she can only use offensive magic. When her personality changes, Seth wants her to at least how to gather Fantasia, but he can't understand her teaching methods. He decides to learn on his own, but Melly has an idea. They find Doc, who has prepared roses for his beloved Miss Melba. Miss Melba works at a cafe and Doc pays the price for leering at her when her father smacks him. Melly must then explain that the puppet on Melba's hand is her father. Her father smacks Doc's flowers away. Emily explains that he is a great cook and wonderful father. Melba apologizes for her father's behavior, but Melly explains that this happens to Doc all the time. They enjoy a meal on the house and Seth explains that he is there to search for Radiant. Doc thinks about how foolish Seth is for this and instantly gets irritated when Melba is amazed by how brave Seth is. Seth explains that he needs to learn magic first though, and Molly says that she thought Doc could help since he is a researcher. Doc begins ranting about how terrible Seth is for asking for help after all the terrible things he has done to him. However, he instantly changes his mind when Melba points out how amazingly kind it would be for him to help. Doc instantly decides to help and states that with his help using magic will be easier than frying an egg. Doc is then shocked to see Seth getting more attention from Melba, but Seth can't handle the flavor of her roast beef flavored tea. Doc pretends to like it and is offered plenty more. Doc then uses Seth's training as an excuse and they get out of there. Doc then angrily explains that he will help since he promised, but says that he won't be touching any Fantasia and will only help with reading grimoires. Seth wants to learn the spell Meteor Drops first and Doc instructs him on how to visualize the magic he wants to make. Sethan shouts the incantation, but it doesn't work. Several more tries result in failure and Doc tells him that it takes more than spirit to make it work. Seth gives it another try as magic forms on his fists, but he just unleashes another Titan punch and he sends Doc flying afterwards. Seth continues to apologize, but Doc refuses to continue helping him. Melly desperately tries to think of a way to help Seth train and shocks the others when she states that she will pound the magic into his body to make sure he remembers it. Her personality has changed as she uses Meteor Drops to attack and Doc is forced to try and protect Melba, but it just sent flying again. Melly then chases Seth as he refuses to fight her back, but she tells him that is why he is weak. Her next attack sends him flying and we see that his glove is cut open. Melly's massive destruction causes debris to almost fall on her, so Seth tries to save her. However, he realizes that his Titan punch won't be Able to reach in time and begs for meteor drops to work. This time he screams it out loud and shocks everyone as the spell works and he saves Melly. Seth couldn't be more excited, and we see that crazy Melly seems glad as she reverts back to her normal self. Melly is ashamed for all the damage and worries that Seth might not want to ever speak to her again, but he points out how he could have never learned how to use the spell without her. Things aren't perfect though, as Doc seems to have flown off again. Later Seth shows Yaga his spell. Yaga says his fantasia leaves a lot to be desired but explains that it isn't bad. Seth assumes that this means he can go to Radiant now, but Yaga shuts him down. Yaga explains that many of the world's most noted sorcerers have tried long and hard to get there, but not a single person has succeeded in doing so. Seth will have to become a first-rate sorcerer if he wants to step foot there, and Seth backs Yaga to take him as his pupil. Yaga agrees but tests him with the cauldron crash attack first, as Yaga expected. Says somehow managed to stop it, and Yaga tells him that he will need to learn to control far more than that with his frail hands. He warns that his training is strict, but Seth eagerly accepts. Later Seth interrupts Melly's tea party again and asks to stay at her house. He had been sleeping at the park, but Doc explained that that cost money too, and he needed to find a place to sleep. Nelly gladly invites Seth to stay in one of her empty rooms but is embarrassed when she has to tell him that her tea party guests are just dolls. Get ready for more interesting video our channel provides for every latest and high-rated anime. If you want to watch more videos, subscribe our channel along with like and share it. Help us to increase will.